Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Together Digital Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from women in digital who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital. We are a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital, marketing, advertising, tech, and choose to share our knowledge, power, and connections. If you aren't a member yet and you want to learn more about us, you can at www.togetherindigital.com. I'm really excited to welcome all of you today to meet with and talk with our guest, Aparna Ray. Aparna, normally at this point, I read the bio, but I know that feels awkward, and I want to honor your request for once, and I'm going to do something a little different just for you, because I love you. I want you to tell the audience that are listening a little bit about you and your background.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, hi everybody. Good morning. I'm excited to be here for round two. My background, I will say that I'm a little bit of a career troublemaker, and also a serial entrepreneur. My background, like formal training, is in education and adult learning. And over the last couple of years, I really sort of like sideways stepped into the world of like workplace equity, data, DE&I, and really committing to increasing transparency about what's happening in workplaces so that we can be not only advocates for ourselves, but that we can advocate for other people as well, and like really make workplaces safe and like feel good, and not a kind of a gross one-sided relationship that I think a lot of us have had with our employers over the years. So yeah, that's the work that I do. Definitely identify as being an activist. And also, once you've been a teacher, you almost always wear your teacher hat on. So yeah, happy to be here and have this conversation.
Same. It's so good to have you back. You were back with us. I don't know, it was probably last year. I should have looked before we hopped on, but it's been about a year, although times like now, time is weird. But the reason we brought you back was because you had sent an email that just like arrow straight to my heart. I was sitting on a Monday morning, getting ready to write our member newsletter and thinking, what can I say to our members to make them feel a little more at peace? And I'm like, right now, I don't know if there's anything I can say, but there was an email from you that's part of your Moving Beyond newsletter, which I recommend all of you checking out and subscribing to, that talked about meritocracy and our mental health. And it was just this light bulb went off, because there's something about understanding the systems in the world in which we live in that gives you back some power when you feel really powerless. So I wanted to kind of bring you back and have a conversation about meritocracy and how it pertains to burnout, because it's something that I hear every single day from our members, from non-members, from women and people of color especially. So if we start with the WebMD, our favorite place to go to look when we're feeling something health-wise, the way they describe burnout is it's defined as a form of exhaustion caused by constantly feeling swamped. It's the result of excessive and prolonged emotional and physical mental stress. In many cases, burnout is related to one's job. Burnout happens when you're overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to keep up with life's incessant demands. Or is it all that and something more? Is it all that and something more? We work in an industry that is very fast paced and that believes that hustle has to be the way to life and busy is a badge of honor. Aparna, we all know what burnout is. We're all here because we're probably feeling it. Can you enlighten our listeners a little bit more about what meritocracy is, so we can start to see how there's a connection between that and burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're all feeling it. And I would say that I think the defining quality of burnout is that it often feels like depression. right? Like that low grade hum where you feel tapped out. You're not excited. You're not excited. You are sending your friends too many memes about like Friday happy hours and how awful Monday mornings are, right? Like if you're doing that, you there's a good chance that you're probably a little bit burnt out. Meritocracy, on the other hand, is this idea that our success is tied to our ability to perform and produce. That we are solely responsible for our ability to grow in our careers, to like be good parents, to be fit, right? It's this idea that if you put in enough hours, if you work hard, if you're motivated, then you're going to be successful, right? It links success to our ability to perform and produce. And I'm sure as you're listening to that, you can imagine like how meritocracy and burnout are related, right? Because especially if you live and work in America, in the United States, we're in a always on culture, and that always on culture is also like the legal framework. And when I say it's also the legal framework, it is the absence of paid family and medical leave, right? So like birthing people are it constantly in this bind of like, how late into my pregnancy can I work and how quickly do I have to come back so I don't go broke, right? Because it's not paid family and medical leave is not paid for. If you're lucky, you work in a company or you live in a state where there are accommodations, awesome, but like that they're not available to the vast majority of people. It's in how our vacations are set up, right? Like most of the people in this country don't actually have any paid PTO. But also like PTO is like 2 weeks, it's 10 days. It's 10 days. And as I think like a lot of you might be mid-career women, um, it takes like 4 days to get into vacation mode. And if your vacation is 5 days, like you didn't have a vacation. So it's part of like the American way of life is that you should just always be working, and you're made to feel pretty guilty, right? Last year I went on a 4-day vacation to Hawaii, and I told all of my clients that I was going to go on said vacation, and 3 of them said to me, well, could you just eke out a half an hour for a call on your vacation? It's just going to be a half an hour. And I was like, yeah, but it fucking ruins my peace, man. Like, I don't want to talk to you when I'm on vacation. Also, like, literally, there is no such thing as a philanthropic emergency. Like, just like whole, like you can live 48 hours, and then when I'm back, we can chat. And they were really insistent, and so like in those kinds of environments, and I'm like, oh, how are you treating your employees? Like nobody ever goes on vacation. So it's just, I think, part and parcel. And when we start to link achievement with productivity alone, we are refusing to accept the fact that everybody's life is not the same.
100%. Those are all such great points and things that I don't think all of us in the rush of daily life and work and ladder climbing ever stop to think about how much those, those systems, those roles, those setups within our cultures and within our own society do sort of perpetuate that idea. Work harder and you'll get farther ahead. So let's talk about why working harder and getting ahead is a myth.
Woof. I mean, I could say a lot on this topic, but I just like consider people to really think about what am I responsible for in my day-to-day life, right? Like, of course, my job, but what else am I responsible for? If you're a parent, which I'm not, like lunches and diaper changes and breastfeeding and like permission slips. There's a whole world that you're managing outside of work. Maybe you're in that like really weird sandwich generation where you still have kids at home, but you may also have parents, or like an elder person that needs caregiving. Maybe somebody in your family is sick. It could be your spouse, it could be another loved one. So you're managing that. Now, if I'm like a single person with nothing living that needs my time, like comparing that to somebody who's a caregiver, already you can start to see, holy crap, like our lives are not the same, right? So what does it even mean for a caregiver to like work? It's just not the same, right? Then you start to look at all of the biases and like structural isms in place: racism, sexism, homophobia. And so now you have all of the things in your life that need your attention, but you also are pushing a boulder uphill because your colleagues are low-key racist, right? Or they might be homophobic, or they're asking you some like really insane questions about any number of things, ranging from like your religious identity to your sexual orientation to your ability, disability, and everything else. um and this is why I think like meritocracy is like such a broken concept, because we're not all starting from the same place. But also it's like going for a walk. I mean, this is an analogy that I use some of the times, right? Like it's like the difference between going for a walk in a really posh upper middle class neighborhood. The sidewalks are nice and clean. um People aren't living in tents on sidewalks, there aren't potholes. How quickly can you walk a mile in that environment? Probably pretty fast, like 15-20 minutes should do it, right? But now imagine like going for a walk in like Manhattan, downtown Seattle, San Francisco, in like an like underinvested neighborhood. It's going to take you 30-40 minutes,
Yeah.
because you're negotiating like possibly, like crappy road conditions, garbage, folks that are unhoused, that are, like living on the streets, any number of things. So that's why, right? Because like in an ideal world, like all of us should have those really nice sidewalks, that have like a nice gentle ramp down. So like if I'm in a wheelchair, or if I'm pushing a stroller, great. Like it's not bumpy, I'm not gonna fall over. But the reality is like that's like literally not what it looks like. So yeah, like pushing systemic issues on people, right? Like if you were now getting docked for like taking 20 extra minutes to walk that mile, you'd be like, okay, but like I couldn't have done it faster. I
Right.
literally could not have done it faster. So yeah, I mean, we can't make people responsible 100% for,
Mhm.
like circumstances that make it difficult for them to perform at that level.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I think that's such a great analogy about just even walking down the street, and it grows into things of even like, challenges in transport for people and things like that, and abilities. And also something you touched on there too, we talk a lot about with our working moms peer group that meets once a month, is just the mental load of motherhood and all those checklists. And usually we are the ones versus our partners in most instances that are kind of having those running checklists in our head. And so that's like a new, it's more
Mhm.
space inside your brain than what you're used to having taking up. And, I think we can a lot of us try to compartmentalize between home and work with all of that in order to save our sanity. But even another point you made was just the mental load of being marginalized, the general overall emotional toll of having to, not just the physical, but the emotional toll of having to walk that more challenging sidewalk with facing more of those, instances of other human suffering. If you're like me and are very empathetic, like that's half the battle. It's just like emotionally walking through all of that, never mind the physical aspect of it. So it's definitely emotional and physical. Now you mentioned, we can go on probably for a while, but what are some other ways that that meritocracy plays out in companies? I mean, as far as work harder, achieve more, get farther.
Yeah, well, because it's a myth, right? It actually, in many ways, has nothing to do with how much or how well you produce work.
Mhm.
Um, an example of it is like in organizations, I think especially like, larger organizations, there'll be like an annual calibration meeting where like people will get together and they're gonna like stack rank employees, which personally I think is like kind of gross. For so many reasons and like maybe not entirely ethical. Um, and what happens is like if your manager liked you, they really advocated for you.
Mhm.
More often than not, it has nothing to do with what you produced.
Mhm.
It's does my manager like me? Do they see me as being valuable? And if they didn't, they're not going to fight very hard for me, and it's going to have a really big impact on my bonus. But also, let's say my manager really likes me, and they walked into that calibration meeting, they advocated for me, and at the end of the day, like a bunch of leaders, above them, still made a different decision. um, and that happens all of the time where you're like, how did X, Y, and Z person get promoted? Like, that's the myth of meritocracy. Like, it has nothing to do with what they produce. A lot of times it's like the person that was liked, like another example that stands out to me, and this is something that happened very recently. One of my girlfriends calls me and she's frustrated. She's like, look, this thing is happening in my organization. What do I do? Like, coach me. And I'm like, no, this is not my job. And she's narrating a conversation with her CEO where they're looking at two candidates, a white man and a Black woman. This is like a real life situation, and it happens not just in this conversation, but all over the world, where they're like looking to hire a CTO or like a VP of product, right? A technical role, and it's an education startup. And the CEO is like, well, like we obviously can't look at this Black woman because she doesn't have any education experience. Specifically, her tech experience is amazing, but like not so much the education bit. Well, like also the guy doesn't have any education experience, right? Like, so they're two actually comparable candidates in that neither of them has any education experience. They're both from like good universities, but the CEO is like, well, like this white guy definitely has the chops. And my
Yep.
friend's like, what, like, how do I navigate this conversation? They, if their resume was blinded, they're very comparable, right? And so what does it matter that this like Black woman probably had to like work 10 times harder to have the resume that she has, when all of the biases are playing in the favor of this white guy?
Yeah, I bet you she got the chops.
Huh?
Considering, I said, I'm sure she's the one with the chops, considering what she had to overcome and do to get to that space of having that equivalent resume. So what did
Yeah,
you give her some advice after all, or coach her?
I did, and it was at like 9 o'clock at night. So like, so there are lots of ways that like in which this is like playing out constantly, all day, every single day, right? But I think as women, like we also do it to ourselves, right? Like if one of our friends has gained like some weight, from like making one too many loaves of banana bread or whatever, like also none of my business. Um, the assumption is like, this person's like slacking off in life, like you walk into someone's house, they have a lot of kids, their house is messy, you're like, this parent is really lazy. These like folks need to get it together. And like that's another way in which it shows up is like why are we having a competition with somebody who has children? Like
Mhm.
A, mind your own business, or B, like you could help them clean.
Right? I
But
would
at
love.
no this is a service that I provide as an auntie to all or most of my friends. Yeah, so like, like this idea that somehow the success that we have is linked to like our greatness, it's just a whole lot of crap. It's a lot of luck. like,
Mhm.
if we're being honest with ourselves, it's a lot of luck. Yeah, we might be like hardworking. And it's a whole other set of factors. Like maybe you have an amazing partner,
Mhm.
right? And maybe you have like in-laws that come and watch your kiddos so that you can do the things. Maybe like you're naturally athletically gifted. You don't have to work as hard. So yeah, like it doesn't, I don't know. I mean, like I'm kind of over it. Like it's Friday. Like I really hope everybody that's like gonna listen to this podcast is gonna like turn off their computer at 3 o'clock and go for a walk,
Right.
right? Or watch TV or do the thing that brings them joy, because at the end of the day, like just hustling harder isn't gonna get you there.
No. And I think the reason why I wanted to have this conversation so badly was what you touched on there is like that contrast and comparison that we make, that makes us think we have to work even harder. And again, I think you and I both kind of identify as, type A overachievers. It's really hard to break those habits. But what you're talking about is being much more mindful to I try to identify, is this me talking or meritocracy? When I'm looking at somebody
Mhm.
else saying they're not working hard enough because I'm working harder, that is also exhausting because you just think you have to keep working harder. And that's just a
Yeah.
lot, right? And then the same thing when you are working harder, I hear, when I talk to so many women within our group, a lot of them seem to think that leading is doing all the things, planning all of the cultural events for their company, doing all the extra
Mhm.
unseen work that nobody else will raise their hand and do is going to be the thing that gets them promoted. But you're 100% right. It's relationships, it's connections, it's who's liked, it's who's favored that gets.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise we wouldn't see what we're seeing, which those two examples you explained, I'm sure each person listening to this now and in the future will say in her lifetime, her career lifetime, she has experienced something of the like, if not multiple times. So, let's dig in on that a little bit more too, as far as meritocracy and how it plays out, because we did touch on it a little bit, but I wasn't sure if you had anything else to add on how it plays out for women and people of color specifically.
I mean, like we've already been talking about it, right? Like I think especially for women parents,
Mhm.
like you're taking a penalty by becoming a parent. You get mommy tracked. Right? There's a double standard around flexibility. Like somebody can have flexibility because they play in like some intramural soccer team. But if you're a parent and you're a woman and you say, "Hey, I gotta leave early to like make a doctor's appointment or like like PTA meeting or whatever," right?
Mhm.
Man, all of the judgment,
Yeah.
right? That comes with it. And I think, for people of color, look, like I'm not American. I wasn't like born and raised here. But like racism
Yeah.
is like day in and day out, all day, every single day. Um, and at the end of the day, when you live in the United States and you're a person of color, all of your identities are hyphenated, right? And so there's a normal, which is being white, and everybody else has a hyphenate. You're Asian American, African American,
Mhm.
Native American. I'm like, the Native people are like OG,
They're
like they are the
even now.
Americans, right? So, and there is an implicit association that someone who's a person of color is inherently less qualified. They're inherently less capable. When people start talking about like diversity hiring, the first thing that comes up, even with anybody that considers themselves a nice white person, is, oh, but do we want to sacrifice credentials? Do we want to sacrifice quality by hiring a person of color, by hiring a vendor or contractor or business owner of color? That happens constantly. And I mean, I could talk all day and make a list of a gazillion things, and how like this myth of meritocracy plays out for women, for people of color, for queer folks, for differently abled folks, for non-Christians. I moved to the United States after having lived in the Middle East. And the number of times people would ask me questions if I knew any terrorists, I was like,
Yeah.
legit, no, but like, also, do you know any terrorists? Because like the likelihood is actually higher, like that you would know one, than I would know one.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's all day, every day, and despite that exhaustion and the burnout that comes from living in a society that's deeply racist, that's deeply sexist, women and people of color pushing ahead, right? Like, we're still showing up, we're still planning the parties, we're still
Yep.
taking the notes, and like all the permission slips are still signed.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Ugh. Yeah, to all of that. There are so many times I'm like, I can't flip my desk over right now because then the whole Zoom would be over. um, yes, to all of that. What is, speaking of being America and American too, I think sometimes again we don't see the waters that we swim in because if you are a natural born citizen or you grew up here from a young age, this is all you know. But
Mhm.
there are some things about our culture and society that add to this myth of meritocracy and to burnout. How are other countries different? That's one thing I do love to do, is kind of look at how their cultures and societies are doing it. And you know what? Funny, it's working for them. I don't know why we don't think it could work for us, but what are some things we can learn from maybe some other cultures and societies to do things differently?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, great question. So there are definitely countries where there's like mandatory vacations and mandatory paid leave specifically. And when you force the non-birthing parent, which in many instances could be a man, although not exclusively, obviously, you're leveling the playing field.
Mhm.
There was many years ago, I was working on when the state of Washington was writing the regulations for our paid family and medical leave legislation. I was doing a lot of work in that space. And I remember having one conversation with an HR person at KKR, which is a massive financial institution, right? And I said, hey, what do you think about like the guys at your firm taking time off? And he said to me, look, these guys get paid way too much. They should be hiring a nanny. And like, frankly, their wives could be taking care of their children. They don't need to be away from, yeah, that was his response. And I said, okay, so like, how much time are men at your firm take? Like, how much time are they away? And he was like, well, on average, like 3 days. And I was like, it's also the same amount of time that you take off when you have like dental surgery, but like now you have a human child, and maybe that requires a little bit more of your attention, you know so right, like I can't even imagine being a woman working in that firm, because like, how are you treated when you have a kid? And then he also said that, like, on average, like, our female associates, typically come back, within 4 to 5 weeks. And then I'm thinking, what? So great, I've like just literally pushed out a bowling ball from
Right.
my body, and great, sounds great. Like, I guess I'll be back in 5 weeks. I don't need time to heal and like forget breastfeeding, right? Because like, when are you gonna do that? And that conversation has really, really, really struck with me. Like, countries that really force, especially men, to take time when they're welcoming a new child, have more equitable, less meritocratic cultures. Also places that have universal healthcare,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right? Because then you're not spending a lot of time caregiving. And that's something that we don't actually talk about in the United States, is, yeah, if you lived in a country where you knew your parent or loved one when they were old or sick could be taken care of, then that's not coming out of like the time that is your time,
Yeah.
right? Places that have cheaper or universally subsidized or covered education, right? So I think that I don't know that this has necessarily been studied, but if I was gonna take a guess, I would say that in places where our basic needs are covered, right? Are places that tend to have like less of a meritocracy culture. Our education, healthcare, food and housing, if we need help there. Places that are incredibly capitalistic, especially the fucked up version of capitalism that we have in America, those are really hard places. Which is also like where I come from, India, high value for meritocracy. A lot of Asian cultures, very high value for meritocracy. You work a lot, you work hard, it starts early, you go to school, then you go to tuition, then you study on the weekends. And by the way, like also you work 6 days a week. When I was living and working in India in my early 30s, even though I was a senior leader in an organization, I worked Saturdays. Everybody worked Saturdays, right? The saving grace there was that it was so affordable to have help for like cleaning, laundry, cooking, all those things that in a way you could do it, but like you never turned your brain off. You just kind of were working all of the time.
Yeah, Julie kind of made a point in the chat as you were talking to, obviously like women are impacted tremendously by the lack of quality maternity leave, but paternity leave in general, it just perpetuates the absentee fathers, which we know impacts our children and their upbringing. And then also there's just a stigma and not allowing men to be parents. This whole kind of idea that dads can't make their priority shifts the way that women make the priority shifts once you have a child. It's unfair to even them, because again, they might feel pressured into showing back up after 3 days. Because what are the guys going to do? I stay gone for 2 weeks, nobody else does.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting. And then I had like a million other thoughts as you were talking, but you know what? You said everything so well. I'm not going to add on to it. I'm just going to ask the next question. Because so clearly for all of the reasons that we've stated and talked about, there's a toll on our mental health. And while we can't necessarily change the systems, we can't have universal health care, we can't have a year paid maternity leave overnight. What are some things that we have control over? What are some things we can start to do to take better care of ourselves despite the systems and despite the myth of meritocracy?
Well, I hate the word self-care, just like a raging hate for that word.
Why?
Because you can't self-care your way out of living and working in an environment where the systems are not designed for you. You literally, like, how many bubble baths are you going to take?
Self-care is a bubble bath.
Sure. Right. So self-care doesn't have to look like bubble baths. I also live in a house with no tubs, which is great because gross. How it's like saying we can solve for economic inequities with GoFundMe campaigns, right? Like reparations are not a one-to-one solution. You can't give a Black or a Native person money and be like, yeah, we're going to make some progress, right? We're going to do reparations. That's not how it works. It needs to come right? Like it needs to be structural, systemic, institutional. And so I think the same with meritocracy. There's literally no amount of self-care is going to help alleviate the fact that we live in a system that does not value women, that does not value people of color, that doesn't value people that aren't like straight, cis, white, hetero, mostly men, but also white women. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you can take better care of yourself. You can have better boundaries for sure, like always, like learn how to say no. say no. Like someone's asking you to take notes, be like, actually, I'm not available because I have like work that I need to do. The consequences of that is going to be that like you're going to be seen as disruptive or not a team player, or if you're a woman of color, like angry or bitchy, right? Like these are all the words. So my recommendation to like really anybody is um like do advocacy at the organizational level, like push for those mandatory paid leave, like push for the mandatory take your goddamn PTO. Like you should be taking it every year, 100% of it. Take your sick time. That's not like extra time. No, like that is your time. Take it. Use it to run errands. Go to the spa, right? Like your boss actually doesn't need to know. So, but like work on addressing systems. And I would say then, like, if we are in decision-making roles, which many of us are, it's like look internally, like how do you treat people? How do you treat people? What are the assumptions that you're making? Where does that assumption come from? And like really work on addressing your implicit biases, your implicit associations. If you find yourself thinking so and so is lazy or so and so is like underqualified, like, like have a moment of pause and be like, why do I think that? And there's an amazing tool that I use all the time. And in fact, like I often like print it out and laminate it and give it to my clients. And it's called the ladder of inference. It's called the ladder of inference. You can look it up. There's a gazillion awesome little like graphics for it. And the ladder of inference basically says like there's a lot, like there's a lot of information coming your way. And you make assumptions on the basis of your prior experiences or your lived experiences that are not always based in evidence, right? So as you make decisions, as you take actions, let them be evidence-based, right? Like our gut instincts, while good at keeping us safe in many instances, are not really great for like performance evaluation. Right. That's why you like document your work, because who knows what happened 12 months ago? Like I don't even remember. So yeah, I think that it's less about like how I take care of myself. For me, it's really like how do I take care of the institutions and build better ones? So it doesn't come down to things like self-care being the antidote to a culture of meritocracy.
No, great answer. Great answer. And to that note, I mean, the idea of making and working towards systematic change, again, it's like, it does make so much sense. It's like, why spin your wheels and your energy on anything other than, because it is the only thing, it's the only antidote. But that kind of takes its toll. How does meritocracy begin to show up even in our equity efforts at work? We have a lot of women who are ERG members or ERG leads, or within organizations like Together Digital, where we're trying to work to make a safe space for women who, are seeking that safe space.
Yeah. How we do that, I don't know that there's like a checklist that I can provide. There's no checklist, right? Like how do we, it's going to be a different answer for every person. And I do think it comes down to like, check yourself first. Take care of your needs first. Don't be that leader who's like, well, I was a single mom and I didn't get a single day of paid leave and I'm now a VP and you can do it too. Like, literally don't be that person. And I think also like in any area of our life where we have power of influence, we have a choice. Like, are we going to use it, or are we going to sit back? And there's a lot of sitting back that happens. And and one thing that over the past month that like has really stuck out to me is the all of the conversations around the overturning of the Roe v. Wade decision.
Yep.
For the last 20 years, like Black and brown women who are reproductive justice, reproductive rights leaders have tried so freaking hard to get white women like playing on the same team. And it literally took this massive calamity for white women to be like, oh yeah, of course it also impacts me. Like, because now like it literally impacts everybody. And I think that this is like, for me, this is like a really dramatic example of like what happens when we are being complacent, when we're being silent, when we're not wielding our power and influence, when we're not collaborating, and also like when we're not addressing systemic issues, right? Like being in an interpersonal like plane doesn't drive progress. It might make us feel really good. It for sure, right? Like going out for drinks with your girlfriends also makes me feel good. I do it all the time. But at the end of the day, like all of these things, like our liberation is deeply connected to every single person. Like we, just like with reproductive rights, if it's not the law of the land, great, like maybe your wealth and access can help you get something done, but it's going to have a really huge impact. That's not just about, having 1 million more children next year as a result of not having abortion access. It's right. Like then what happens, right? Like think through that chain. What are the consequences for our society? Like similarly, like I think with climate change and like people with power and influence. I'm like, I don't know why you took your private jet to go fishing. Like you could have just flown commercial. It's like a 40-minute flight. Like you saved 10 minutes. Right. And also like you can't live in a dome. Like air is not static, great. Like you can buy your house in Montana, but like also the pollution is going to come there because air moves. So yeah, I mean, I'll just like say it ad nauseum. It's like, go deal with the structural issues, like use your power, speak up, and maybe like you'll get fired. And like, that's not the end of the world.
Right. I know. And it's a job, right? Everyone check out the Ladder of Inference. Julie included a link in the chat for those who are listening with us live. And I 100% agree. I think, doing the work, the inner work that's needed to overcome your unconscious biases, but then also to recognize your own privilege and power, and then to use that is like the best thing you can possibly do. And it's definitely one thing I see women hold back from doing because they think, I had to struggle to get here. I had to climb and work hard to get here. Why would I give this to anybody else? And it personally blows my mind, the rationale. But
Yeah.
that's like the best thing we can do. And I'm always kind of surprised at how few women are willing to mentor or to champion or even sponsor other women.
Yeah.
It's like,
yes.
We're not getting there. You're not free until we're all free. It's like, so if you want to just stay where you are, yeah, keep doing what you're doing and pretend nothing's happening. If you really do feel that you realize the need for change, that is the best thing you can do, is begin to step up into that power and use your privilege and ability to help and support others and sponsor others. And again, in that work itself, the bonuses is hopefully you feel good doing it, So yeah. It helps keep you going when things get hard and systems make you want to flip a freaking table. So say we want to start having some conversations. You left us with that thought of, having those conversations at work, making these things seen and heard. What do you have some thoughts, tips, guidelines on how we begin to have these conversations with coworkers, managers, even our mentors about the myth of meritocracy? Because we talked about a lot today.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Like, do you want like basic answer or like nerdy girl answer?
Oh, nerdy girl, please. Always nerdy girl.
Yeah. So meritocracy is something that is academically studied. There are literally people that study meritocracy, and because people study it, they have ways of measuring it. When we work in organizations, one of the things that we measure is meritocracy, because it's often very closely linked to like high attrition rate of any like historically underrepresented group. It's usually an indicator that things are like kind of yucky and toxic with people's managers. And we can do that because academics have come up with something called scales, right? It's a set of questions to measure a sentiment like meritocracy. And so I would say that like, if you are listening and you're like, yeah, fine, like I want to try and address the systemic, then you have to go measure it in your organization. And there are many instruments available for you to actually measure. You can like survey people and get actually a really good sense, and do that, because you'll be really surprised at who in your organization has really bought into the myth of meritocracy, including maybe yourself. Because when you measure something, they're not saying like, hi, Amy, do you believe in meritocracy? No, they're asking you lots of other questions to gauge whether or not you believe in meritocracy, right? So that's, I think, definitely one thing to do. I think for people that are like troublemakers and risk takers, something to start tracking is actually like what you're being asked to do, what your peers are being asked to do, like, and like noticing, for instance, like a promotion velocity, because like that's grounds for a legal challenge. And like nothing gets companies like having better behaviors than looking at a class action lawsuit. Like literally Google just a couple of weeks ago did like a $500 million pay leveling exercise because they were literally paying people less, right? And it's not legal. And like staring down a barrel of a massive class action lawsuit will do that. They're like, yes, we have $500 million to fix the situation. That's, and I think that at the very basic level, like educate yourself on what it is. There are some really great resources. I should have like pulled this copy of this book.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about readings to
I'm
read.
not going to say this is like a really easy read. Like I've definitely fallen asleep at least 10 different times trying to read this book. It's The Meritocracy Trap, by one of the scholars that studies this concept, this sentiment, this framework. But just, I think even just do a Google search of like burnout and meritocracy or meritocracy, and there are some really great articles. There's an awesome article in The Atlantic that's a little bit dated, like as in it came out, I think in 2016, 2017, but still super duper relevant.
Yeah, that's amazing. You always make good book recommendations. So yeah, that's what I was going to ask next, is what books would you maybe recommend, other readings? I mean, there is the good old Google for you to look at, but I was doing research for these questions today, and there's plenty of research articles written from various universities out there about it. So there's plenty out there to read on. And I'm sure a lot of you, I hope you are listening today that are relating and seeing these tendencies of this trap of meritocracy and how it's really attributing to our burnout, but then also just maybe some tools, tips, advice, and ways in which you can start to navigate and find ways to make and create systematic change so that we're all not so freaking tired and mad all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Find some peace, Aparna, always such fun. I love talking to you because I love to listen and just learn, take all of it in and be a sponge, because you always have, such great thoughts and ideas to share and points of view. So I really appreciate it. Does anybody within our live audience, do you all have questions? We'll take a second if you do. If not, Aparna just popped a couple of other article links in the chat for all of you as well who are listening live, so you can read on. All right, no other questions? All right, ladies. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I know I found it very helpful and enlightening. Sometimes when you feel powerless, knowledge is just one thing that really helps you kind of regain your power. So keep educating yourselves, keep going out there and doing the good work you're doing. Aparna, thank you for all you do. I'm glad we got to
Thank
connect.
you. Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And thanks, Julie, for helping on the back end. It's always great having you there as my wing woman. Happy Friday, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.